Let's have a look now at the different types of cloud service and deployment models that we could use with cloud computing. Now, the first type is known as the private cloud. Now, what this means is it's somewhere between the traditional IT model that we talked about before, where you own everything and you manage everything. But we've provisioned some layers of software that will allow us to automate certain things, and it makes it kind of a bit more like a cloud. We'll talk a bit more about that later on in the course. But in this case, you do own and you do manage this entire stack. So everything from the piece of hardware on the bottom, the hypervisor that virtualizes your operating systems, again, that's something we'll cover in a little while, and then the operating systems and the various layers of your application stack, everything is managed by you. Now, the reason it's called a private cloud is because things like that on-demand capability, the self-service, the multi-tenancy, and the metering and elasticity can be enabled within certain constraints in a private cloud environment that you own in your own data center. But you're still managing the entire stack, so it doesn't have as many benefits as the cloud, and it can be very complex and very capital intensive to build a private cloud. I've done it myself, and I can guarantee you it's much easier using public cloud services. With a private cloud, an analogy would be a house. With a house, you might buy your house, you own the house, you're responsible for anything that goes wrong with the house, and you're responsible for furnishing the house, all the contents that go into it. The next type of cloud service model is what we call infrastructure as a service. Now, I'm just showing you here what you manage. So what you can see is some of those layers from the previous slide have disappeared. The hardware and the hypervisor, they're gone. With infrastructure as a service, you are not responsible for the underlying hardware. You're responsible for the actual operating system that you run. Now, an example of infrastructure as a service is Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud EC2, which we're going to be covering a lot in this course. Azure Virtual Machines is a Microsoft example, and Google Compute Engine is Google's answer to infrastructure as a service. An analogy here would be a hotel. With a hotel, you don't own the building, but you can lease some space in that building. So you can rent out a room for a night, and if you want to rent out a room for a few nights, then obviously you'll pay more. It's the same with infrastructure as a service. You're responsible for this container here. This is the operating system, Windows or Linux, and the application that you put on top of it. But the underlying hardware that enables you to run that particular virtual server in the cloud is not your responsibility. Next, we have what's called platform as a service. Now you're not responsible even for that operating system, the Windows or the Linux instance that you had to manage before. You would have to patch manage it and tune it and make sure that it's secured. In this case, all of that goes away. All you have here is the data and the web application. So you're essentially uploading data and code, nothing else. You're not responsible for anything else. A couple of examples here would be AWS Elastic Beanstalk, which we're going to be covering. Azure Web Apps is the Microsoft example. And for Google, they have the Compute App Engine. Lastly, we have what's known as software as a service, SaaS. In this case, you're really not responsible for anything, which is why I've crossed out the managed by you. You don't manage anything. You're purely consuming the service. If you use Facebook, for example, or Salesforce.com, these are both examples of SaaS software. You're not responsible for anything. You just sign up with an account. In some cases, you pay, like with Salesforce.com, and you just consume it, but you don't have any flexibility to control how that software is designed. You just have to use what they give you. Examples here would be Google Apps, Salesforce.com, and Zoom. So let's compare these side by side. We've got the private cloud on the left where you manage everything. You get greater responsibility, but also greater control. You can configure this entire stack exactly the way you want it. With infrastructure as a service, or IaaS, you manage from the virtual server upwards. With PaaS, you simply upload your code or your data to create your application. And lastly, with SaaS, you just consume an application. There's very little responsibility here, but also very little control. We've just covered the service models, so then we have what we call the delivery models or the deployment models for cloud computing. We've talked a bit about this earlier on in this lesson. Firstly, we have private cloud. Here you build your own infrastructure like your virtualization infrastructure, your storage and your backup systems, your network and firewall systems, and you build and manage all of this. But then you layer on top of it some various software capabilities that turn this from being a traditional operating model into a private cloud. So it's a bit more like a public cloud, but you still own all the infrastructure. So that's why it's called a private cloud, because it's not shared with any other companies. It's within your own data center and it's your own management, and you own the actual infrastructure as well. So with the cloud management software layer on top, you have some of the capabilities that you'd expect in the cloud, but you still own your infrastructure and pay for it. Some of the benefits are you get complete control of the entire stack, and security. In some cases, organizations will need to or prefer to keep their infrastructure and their applications and their data in their own private cloud because there's some reasons, maybe it's a compliance reason, or they just don't trust the public cloud. Now, we'll talk a lot more about that later on, and there's some very good reasons why you can deploy even highly secure applications in the public cloud. But some organizations might have a compliance requirement, or they just simply don't trust using a shared service. Private cloud environments might use software such as VMware, Microsoft, Red Hat, or OpenStack. We then have the public cloud. So here you're connected via the internet, or in some cases a private link from your corporate office to the public cloud, and the public cloud is where the services are delivered. So you're a consumer of those services. Services like compute and storage and network and database. Some of the benefits are you get variable expenses, so in other words, you're paying just for what you use instead of a capital expense. So you're not paying for purchasing any hardware. You get economies of scale. AWS are huge, and they've been able to optimize their infrastructure and utilize their buying power to lower their costs for customers. And you get massive elasticity. So many services in AWS are virtually unlimited capacity. So however much you need, it can be there for you. Examples are Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. Now, a hybrid cloud is where we actually have a private cloud and a public cloud connected together. Now, sometimes that would be via the internet or potentially a private link, but it means you're getting the best of both worlds. This allows companies to keep their critical applications and their sensitive data, perhaps in the traditional private cloud environment, but they could also put them into the public cloud as well. So it really depends on your use cases. You can utilize the cloud for what it's really good for, which is things like platform services and software as a service, and using infrastructure as a service and having those elastic resources. It also facilitates the portability of data and applications, so you can fail over into the cloud, or you can burst into the cloud when you need more capacity, or you simply want to migrate your systems between these two environments for certain reasons. Lastly, we have something called a multi-cloud, and this is where you're taking advantage of multiple different cloud models. So you might have a private cloud on VMware, a public cloud on Azure and AWS, and maybe another private cloud stack on OpenStack. So you're really getting the best of each of these different providers and putting your applications wherever they're best suited. Now that's it for this lesson. I've packed quite a bit in there, so I hope you got lots of value, and I'll see you in the next lesson.